Joshua knelt on the hot stone pavement, his thin body trembling. 2 security guards towered over him like giants. Their hands gripped his torn shirt, ready to drag him away like garbage. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I just need to see him. He's my father." The woman in the white wedding gown stepped closer. Her dress sparkled with thousands of tiny crystals that caught the sunlight. Angela was beautiful, but her eyes were cold as ice. "Hello family, welcome back. Please take a moment to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It truly means a lot to us. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. So sit back and relax as we dive into the story." She looked down at the dirty boy at her feet. Her perfect red lips curled into a cruel smile. Behind her, hundreds of wedding guests watched in silence. Some held champagne glasses. Others held up their phones, recording everything. "Your father?" Angela's laugh was sharp and mocking. "You think Mr. Michael Thompson is your father? You must be insane." Daniel's hands shook as he held up a crumpled poster. It was one of the wedding announcements he'd found in the market. The paper was dirty and torn, but the face on it was clear. "Mr. Michael Thompson, the richest man in Lagos." "I know him," Joshua said, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I remember his face. Please, just let me talk to him." Angela snatched the poster from his hands. She looked at it, then threw it on the ground. She spat near his bare, bleeding feet. "You are filth," she hissed. "Do you hear me? Utter filth." The music had stopped. Everyone was staring now. The Grand Palm Grove Resort in Victoria Island with its white pillars and golden decorations seemed to close in around Daniel. This was supposed to be the happiest day of Angela's life. But this dirty street boy was ruining everything. Angela turned to the security guards. Her voice rang out clear and commanding across the courtyard. "What are you waiting for?" she screamed. "Strip him. Beat him. Drag him out of here like the street dog he is." The guards hesitated for just a moment. Then they grabbed Daniel. One seized his matted hair and yanked his head back. Joshua screamed. The other guard began tearing at his already ragged clothes. "No. Please, somebody help me," Joshua cried out. The guests watched in horror. But nobody moved. Nobody dared to challenge the powerful bride on her wedding day. As the first blow landed on Daniel's face, one question burned in everyone's mind. Who was this mysterious boy? And why did he claim to be the son of the great Mr. Michael Thompson? 9 years earlier, life in Lagos was perfect for the wealthy Thompson family. Michael Thompson was not just rich. He was one of the most powerful men in Nigeria. He owned hotels, banks, and shopping malls across the country. But his greatest treasure was not money. It was his son Joshua. The boy was 12 years old, full of life and laughter. He was an only child, born to Michael and his wife Sarah after many years of prayer. The Thompson mansion sat in the heart of Ikoyi. It had marble floors that gleamed like glass. The ceilings were so high that Joshua's voice would echo when he ran through the halls playing hide and seek. Every evening at 5 o'clock, Michael would leave his office in Victoria Island. No matter how important the meeting, he always came home. Joshua would be waiting by the tall iron gates of their estate. "Daddy!" Joshua would shout, running as fast as his small legs could carry him. Michael would drop his briefcase and catch his son in a tight hug. They would spin around and around until they were both dizzy. "How was school today, champ?" Michael would ask, messing up his son's hair. "It was great. We learned about Nigerian history. And I saw a lizard by the pool. Mummy said I should leave it alone, but I think it liked me." "I'm sure it did," Michael would say, his heart full of joy. Joshua loved sitting on his father's lap in the big leather chair in the study. Michael would tell him stories about business and the world. Joshua's mother, Sarah, would read to him every night before bed. Her voice was soft and sweet like honey. Life was beautiful. The three of them were a perfect circle of love. They had no idea that someone was watching. Someone filled with jealousy and greed. Someone who was already making plans to destroy their happiness. Her name was Victoria. She had worked briefly as Michael's assistant years ago. She had been fired for stealing company funds. But she had never forgotten the wealth she had seen. She wanted it all for herself. Victoria was patient. She studied the family from afar. She learned their routines. She watched and waited for the perfect moment to strike. Her plan was dark and terrible. But she believed it would make her rich beyond her wildest dreams. Then one Tuesday afternoon in October, everything changed. The sun was shining brightly over Lagos. The sky was blue and clear. Joshua had just finished his lessons with his private tutor. He was excited because he had a new butterfly net. He ran out to the garden to catch butterflies just like he did every day. His mother, Sarah, watched him from the veranda. She smiled as she saw Joshua running near the gates, chasing a big blue butterfly. The gates were locked. They were always locked. The estate was safe. Sarah turned away for just 30 seconds. The house phone was ringing inside. She went to answer it. When she came back, the garden was empty. The butterfly was still there, floating in the breeze. But Joshua was gone. Sarah's scream tore through the afternoon air. It was a sound of pure terror that made the house staff come running from every direction. Joshua! Joshua, where are you? She cried, racing down the veranda steps. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She ran to the gates. They were still locked from the inside. She checked behind the big mango trees. She looked in the gardener's shed. She searched the pool house. Nothing. Her son had vanished like smoke in the wind. Michael received the phone call in his office at Victoria Island. His secretary's voice was shaking as she told him his wife was on the line. The moment he heard Sarah's voice, his whole world collapsed. He's gone, Michael, she sobbed. I only looked away for a moment. Our baby is gone. Michael dropped the phone. He grabbed his car keys and drove home faster than he had ever driven before. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. His mind was racing with terrible thoughts. When he arrived home, the police were already there. They were asking Sarah questions, but she could barely speak. She just kept repeating the same words over and over. I only turned away for 30 seconds. The police searched everywhere. They questioned the security guards at the gate. They checked the CCTV cameras, but someone had cut the power to them that morning. The guards at the gate swore no car had come in or out. Michael hired the best private detectives in Nigeria. He called friends in the government. He even contacted international security agencies. Money was no object. He would pay anything to find his son. Within hours, Joshua's face was on every television screen in Lagos. Then Abuja. Then the whole country. The story spread like wildfire. Billionaire's son disappears from locked estate. Michael offered a reward. 500 million naira. It was enough money to change someone's life forever. The phones rang day and night with tips and leads. But none of them led anywhere. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Michael and Sarah barely slept. They barely ate. Sarah would sit in Joshua's bedroom for hours, holding his teddy bear and crying. Michael refused to believe his son was dead. He kept searching. He kept hoping. But as time passed, the hope became harder to hold on to. Far away in Port Harcourt, Victoria watched the news with a cold smile. She had paid 2 men to take the boy. Her plan was simple. Scare the family. Make them desperate. Then later she would comfort Michael. She would become his friend. Eventually she would replace Sarah. But the men she hired had panicked when the story became so big. The reward money was huge. The police were everywhere. So they drove Joshua far away to a remote town called Ogoja, near the Cameroon border. They abandoned him there and disappeared. Victoria didn't care that the boy was lost somewhere. She didn't care if he was dead or alive. The first part of her plan had worked. The Thompson family was broken. 3 years passed. 3 long, painful years. Michael's hair turned gray. Sarah's eyes lost their light. Their friends told them it was time to accept the truth. On a gray morning in November, they held a burial ceremony. There was no body. Just an empty casket. Only close family and friends attended. It was held at a private cemetery in Lekki. Sarah stood by the grave, silent tears running down her face. Michael held her hand, but he felt like a dead man himself. Maybe this will bring closure, their pastor said softly. But it didn't bring closure. It brought something much worse. Would this symbolic burial finally end their suffering? Or was it just the beginning of an even greater tragedy? Sarah never recovered from the burial. Something inside her died that day along with the empty casket. She stopped eating properly. She stopped talking to friends and family. She would spend entire days in Joshua's old bedroom, staring at nothing. Michael brought in the best doctors from Lagos, Abuja, even doctors from London. They gave her medications. They tried therapy. But nothing could heal a mother's broken heart. Sarah was fading away like a flower without water. Victoria watched from a distance, pretending to be a concerned friend. She had reconnected with Michael through a mutual business contact. She would call him sometimes, offering words of comfort. She was patient, waiting for her moment. But Sarah and Michael's grief had brought them closer together, not apart. They clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. This wasn't what Victoria had planned. She needed to remove Sarah completely. Victoria found a corrupt nurse through her connections. She paid the woman a large sum of money. The nurse began adding a rare, untraceable poison to Sarah's food. Just a little bit each day. It made Sarah weaker. It made her heart deteriorate slowly. 6 months after the symbolic burial, Sarah died peacefully in her sleep. The doctors said it was heart failure caused by severe depression. Everyone who knew her agreed. She died of a broken heart, they whispered at her funeral. Victoria attended the funeral, dressed in black, pretending to cry. Inside she was celebrating. The path was now clear. Michael Thompson was alone, wealthy, and completely broken. He was perfect for her plan. The Grand Thompson mansion became like a tomb. Michael stopped going to his office in Victoria Island. He handed control of his companies to his trusted managers. He stopped attending social events. He refused visitors. The powerful businessman became a ghost in his own home. He would sit for hours in his study, staring at a large family portrait. Michael, Sarah, and Joshua, all smiling together. That happiness felt like it had happened in another lifetime. Years crawled by slowly. 5 years. Then 6. Then 7. The sharp pain of grief gradually became a dull, constant ache. Michael learned to live with the emptiness, though it never truly left him. Then one evening, at a small charity dinner in Ikoyi, he met a woman who seemed different. Her name was Angela. She was beautiful, confident, and full of life. She didn't treat him like a tragic figure. She treated him like a man. "Mr. Thompson," she said, approaching him with a warm smile. "I've been admiring that painting over there. I think it's from the 19th century, but my friend says I'm wrong." She didn't mention his loss. She didn't walk on eggshells around his sadness. She talked about art, politics, and business. For the first time in 7 years, Michael felt something other than grief. He felt interested. Of course, Angela was actually Victoria. She had changed her appearance, her name, and her entire identity. She had waited patiently for this moment. Now she was finally making her move. Over the next 3 years, she carefully worked her way into Michael's life. She brought him books. She engaged him in debates that made him feel alive again. She filled the terrible silence in his mansion with laughter and conversation. She wasn't trying to replace Sarah. She was creating a completely new space in his world. And slowly, carefully, Michael began to heal. Or at least he thought he was healing. After 3 years of this careful courtship, Michael did something he never thought he would do again. He proposed to Angela. He was older now, tired, and still wounded. But Angela had convinced him that he deserved a second chance at happiness. The wedding was planned for Palm Grove Resort in Victoria Island. It would be the biggest social event in Lagos in years. 500 guests. The finest champagne from France. A live orchestra. Fresh flowers flown in from Amsterdam. Angela had finally won. After 10 years of planning, waiting, and committing terrible crimes, she was about to become Mrs. Thompson. She would be one of the richest women in Nigeria. Nothing could stop her now. But far away in the dusty streets of a forgotten town, a thin, ragged boy was about to see something that would change everything. What would happen when past and present collided at the gates of that wedding? His name was Joshua, but he didn't remember that clearly. He only knew he had once been someone else. Someone loved. Someone who belonged somewhere. He had survived horrors that would have destroyed most people. After the men abandoned him in Ogoja 10 years ago, he had lived in darkness and fear. He couldn't remember how long he was held captive. Time had no meaning in that place. One night, a door was left unlocked. A guard had fallen asleep. Joshua, then only 14 years old, had run. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs collapsed. He ran until he could run no more. But the trauma had damaged his mind. His memories were like pieces of a broken mirror. He knew his name was Joshua. He knew he once had a family. But the details slipped away like water through his fingers. For 6 long years he lived on the streets of Enugu. He begged for food. He slept under bridges and market stalls. He learned which rubbish bins had the best leftovers. He learned to read people's faces to know who might help and who might hurt him. He survived on scraps and fading hope. Deep in his heart, he believed that somewhere, someone was looking for him. He remembered fragments. A man's deep laugh. A woman's gentle hands. A big white gate. A place that felt like home. Then one hot afternoon, everything changed. Joshua was begging near the Ogbeat market. His voice was weak and hoarse. "Please, anything. God bless you." Most people walked past without looking at him. His eyes landed on a poster pasted to a concrete wall. It was large, glossy, and clean. It didn't belong in this dusty, dirty place. It was a wedding announcement. Joshua saw the woman first. She was beautiful in a white dress, smiling with cold, triumphant eyes. But it was the man beside her that made Joshua's heart stop beating. The man was older now. His hair was gray. His face looked tired and sad. But his eyes, those kind, gentle eyes. Joshua knew those eyes. He had seen them 1,000 times in his broken dreams. The sounds of the market faded away. The heat disappeared. The crowds vanished. There was only the poster and those familiar eyes staring back at him. Memories came flooding back like a dam breaking. The garden. The butterflies. The big white gate. His mother's face. His father's laugh. His father's name. Michael Thompson. Joshua's hands trembled as he tore the poster from the wall. At the bottom, in elegant letters, were the details. Palm Grove Resort, Victoria Island, Lagos. Saturday 2 p.m. He looked at a newspaper on a nearby stand. Today was Thursday. He had 2 days. He looked at a map in a shop window. Lagos was over 400 kilometers away. He had no money. No food. No shoes. His feet were bare and covered in scars. But none of that mattered. For the first time in 6 years, Joshua had a destination. He had a purpose. He had hope. He started walking. The journey was brutal. The sun beat down on him like a hammer. The roads were endless ribbons of hot tar that burned his feet. Within hours, his feet were blistering. By the end of the first day, they were bleeding. Hunger twisted his stomach into knots. Thirst burned his throat like fire. He begged for water in small villages along the way. Sometimes a kind person would give him bread or fruit. Other times, people chased him away, calling him a thief. He slept on the roadside at night, clutching the wedding poster to his chest like a sacred treasure. There were moments when his body screamed at him to stop. His legs ached. His head pounded. He felt dizzy and weak. But then he would look at his father's face on the poster. He would remember the love he once knew. He had survived 10 years of hell. He could survive 2 more days. He walked through the day. He walked through the night. He walked for 48 hours straight, stopping only when his body forced him to rest for a few minutes. Finally, on Saturday morning, he arrived. Could a ragged street boy possibly convince anyone that he was the lost son of a billionaire? Palm Grove Resort rose before him like a palace from another world. High white walls surrounded perfectly cut green lawns. Fountains sparkled in the morning sun. The air smelled of expensive flowers and wealth. Everything about this place screamed money and power. Joshua stood at the tall black iron gates, feeling small and dirty. His clothes were nothing but torn rags. His feet were raw and bloody. His body was covered in dust and grime from 2 days of walking. In his shaking hand, he held the crumpled, dirty wedding poster. 2 massive security guards in blue uniforms stood at the gate. They were built like warriors. Their faces were hard and unfriendly. When they saw Joshua approaching, they immediately stepped forward to block him. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" one guard barked, looking at Joshua with disgust. Joshua's voice was barely a whisper. He was so tired, so weak. "Please, I need to get inside." "This is a private event," the second guard said coldly. "Go and beg somewhere else. There's nothing for you here." Tears filled Joshua's eyes. He had come so far. He couldn't give up now. "No, you don't understand," he said, holding up the poster with trembling hands. "Please, this man in the picture. He's my father. I know he is. I remember him. Please, you have to let me see him." The guards looked at the poster. They looked at the dirty, ragged boy. Then they laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound that cut through Joshua like a knife. "Your father?" the first guard sneered. "You think Mr. Michael Thompson is your father? You must be crazy. Now get out of here before we throw you out," the second guard added, pushing Joshua roughly. But Joshua couldn't leave. He had walked for 2 days. His feet were bleeding. His body was breaking. This was his only chance. He fell to his knees on the hot pavement. "Please," he sobbed. "I'm telling the truth. Just let me talk to him. He'll recognize me. I know he will." The commotion was getting louder. Wedding guests and expensive cars were slowing down to stare. Some were getting out to watch. Inside the resort, the ceremony was about to begin. That's when Angela appeared. She was a vision in her sparkling white wedding gown that cost more than most people earned in a year. Her makeup was perfect. Her smile was triumphant. This was her day. Her victory. Nothing could ruin it. But then she saw the crowd at the gates. She saw the dirty boy on the ground. Her perfect smile froze. Her eyes narrowed with rage. "What is this?" she screamed, marching toward the gates. Her heels clicked angrily on the stone path. Her bridesmaids and some guests followed behind her, curious about the drama. The guards looked embarrassed. "We're trying to get rid of him, ma'am," one said. "He's claiming to be Mr. Thompson's son." Angela stared down at Joshua. For a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? Fear? But it was quickly replaced by cold fury. She couldn't let this happen. Not now. Not when she was so close. My father? Angela laughed cruelly. She snatched the poster from Joshua's hands. You think you can crawl out of the gutter and scam your way into a billionaire's wedding? You are nothing. You are filth. No, please, Joshua sobbed, his whole body shaking. I'm not lying. I just need to see him. He'll know me. He won't know you because you are trash, Angela spat. She actually spat on the ground near Joshua's bloody feet. The guests gasped. Some pulled out their phones and started recording. Angela turned to the guards, her voice ringing with authority. What are you waiting for? I want him gone. Strip him. Beat him. Drag him out of here like the street dog he is. The guards hesitated. This seemed too extreme. Ma'am, he's just a boy, one started to say. Did you hear me? Angela screamed. He is ruining my wedding. Do it now. The guards grabbed Joshua. One seized his hair and yanked his head back. Joshua screamed in pain and terror. The other guard began tearing at his already torn clothes. The guests watched in horror, but nobody moved to stop it. Nobody dared challenge the bride on her wedding day. The guards raised their hands to strike. And then, cutting through the chaos like a sword, a voice rang out. Stop. Not another blow. The voice belonged to a man who commanded instant respect. He was tall, elegant, and dressed in an expensive suit. This was David, Michael Thompson's stepson from his first wife's previous marriage. Though not his biological child, Michael had raised him as his own. Now a successful businessman himself, David was known for his sharp mind and his strong sense of justice. He had just arrived at the wedding when he heard the commotion. He pushed through the crowd, his face dark with fury. I said stop, he commanded. The guards froze immediately. They knew who David was. To disobey him was to challenge the Thompson family itself. David rushed to Joshua and knelt beside him, ignoring the dust on his expensive suit. Joshua looked up through swollen, tear-filled eyes. His face was bruised and bloody. As their eyes met, David gasped. He stared at the boy's face, trying to see past the dirt and pain. The shape of the eyes. The curve of the nose. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Joshua? David whispered, his voice shaking. Is it really you? At the sound of his real name, spoken with such gentleness, Joshua felt something break inside him. He looked at David's face. Another memory surfaced through the fog. A kind older boy who used to read him stories. Who played with him in the garden. David, Joshua breathed. I remember you. David's eyes filled with tears. My God, he said, his voice choking with emotion. It's really you. We thought you were dead. He gently helped Joshua sit up, wrapping his own jacket around the boy's shaking shoulders. Angela stood frozen, watching the scene with growing panic. Her face had gone pale beneath her makeup. David, what are you doing? She tried to say, her voice shrill. You know the street rat? He's a liar. A scammer trying to ruin my wedding. David slowly stood up. He turned to face Angela. The look in his eyes was so cold, so full of rage and contempt, that Angela actually stepped backward. You will be silent, David said quietly. Each word was like ice. I promise you, you will regret this for the rest of your life. The tension was thick. The guests held their breath. Angela looked lost for the first time. And then another figure emerged from the resort's main building. It was Michael Thompson himself. He had been in a private room preparing for the ceremony when someone told him about a disturbance at the gates. What is all this noise? Michael asked, his voice tired and irritated. David, what's happening? His eyes scanned the scene. The stunned guests. The frightened guards. His angry stepson. His pale bride. And then his gaze fell on the small, broken figure on the ground, wrapped in David's jacket. Time stopped. Michael's breath caught in his throat. His heart began to pound. He saw past the dirt, past the blood, past the years of suffering. He saw the eyes. Those eyes he had seen every single day in his dreams for 10 years. Joshua, Michael whispered. The name was a prayer. On the ground, Joshua heard that voice. The deep, warm voice from his most precious memories. He turned his head slowly, hardly daring to hope. And then he saw him. Daddy, Joshua whispered back. The word hung in the air. The world seemed to tilt. And then Michael was moving. He didn't walk. He ran. He fell to his knees beside his son, not caring about his expensive suit or the watching crowd. With trembling hands he touched Joshua's face. "You're alive?" Michael wept. "My son. My Joshua. You're alive." He pulled Joshua into his arms and held him like he would never let go. 10 years of grief poured out in his sobs. Joshua clung to his father, crying, "Daddy," over and over. The guests stood in stunned silence, witnessing something more powerful than any wedding. David stood guard over them, tears streaming down his own face. And Angela, the bride, stood alone in her perfect white dress, watching her carefully constructed world crumble into dust. Michael finally looked up at her. The love in his eyes had turned to something else entirely. Something dark and terrible. "You," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "You did this to my son." He didn't need her to answer. The guilt was written all over her face. Michael turned to his security chief. "The wedding is cancelled," he commanded. "Get everyone out. Now." Without another glance at the woman he had almost married, Michael and David gently lifted Joshua and carried him toward the car. They were finally going home. The boy who was lost had finally truly been found. The days following the reunion were filled with both joy and careful healing. Joshua was taken to the best hospital in Lagos. Doctors examined him, treated his wounds, and marveled at how he had survived such suffering. His feet were bandaged. His bruises were cleaned. He was given warm, nourishing food that his body had forgotten existed. Michael never left his side. He sat by Joshua's hospital bed, holding his hand, afraid that if he let go, his son might disappear again. David visited every day, bringing books and stories just like he used to when Joshua was small. But while the Thompson family celebrated their miracle, Angela was facing the consequences of her actions. The wedding cancellation became the biggest scandal in Lagos. Videos of her ordering the beating of a helpless boy went viral on social media. People called her a monster. Her name became synonymous with cruelty. Angela retreated to the luxury apartment Michael had bought for her. But she wasn't broken. She was furious. In her twisted mind, Joshua was the enemy who had stolen her victory. She needed revenge. She called her friend Sandra, a woman as cunning and heartless as herself. Together they hatched a plan. They would destroy Joshua's credibility. They would make people believe he was a fraud, a professional scammer who had fooled the great Michael Thompson. They paid a corrupt journalist a large sum of money. 2 days later, a shocking story appeared online. There was a grainy video that seemed to show Joshua meeting with a wealthy older man in a hotel. The article claimed Joshua was a known con artist who had pulled this scam before on other rich families. The story spread quickly. The same people who had celebrated Joshua's return now began to doubt. Comment sections filled with suspicion and hate. "Maybe he's lying," people wrote. Rich men are always targets for scammers. At the Thompson mansion, Joshua saw the news and broke down in tears. "They think I'm lying," he sobbed. "They think I'm a bad person." Michael was consumed with rage. His face turned red with fury. "I'll sue every single one of them," he roared. "I'll destroy that journalist. I'll destroy everyone who spread these lies." But David remained calm. His eyes were cold and calculating. "No, father," he said quietly. "We don't fight them in the mud. We cut off the head of the snake." He called his most trusted assistant, a man named Victor who was a genius with technology and investigation. "Find out who's behind this," David ordered. "I want proof. And I want it fast." Victor went to work immediately. He was a master at his job. He traced the journalist's bank accounts and found suspicious payments from a shell company. He traced that company to Sandra. He also analyzed the video frame by frame using advanced software. It was a deep fake, a clever forgery but not perfect. There were small digital errors that proved it was fake. Within 3 days, Victor had everything. Bank records, digital forensics, and most importantly, he had found the terrified journalist who, faced with evidence of his crime, signed a full confession. He admitted that Angela and Sandra had paid him to create the fake story. David called a press conference at a 5-star hotel in Victoria Island. Journalists from every major media house in Nigeria attended. Cameras flashed. Microphones crowded the podium. David stood calm and composed, looking every inch the powerful businessman he was. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. He simply laid out the facts. He showed the bank records on a large screen. He showed the video analysis proving it was fake. He played a recording of the journalist's confession. "This was a calculated, malicious attack," David said, his voice steady and clear. "It was designed to destroy a young man who has already suffered more than most of us can imagine. It was orchestrated by Sandra Okeke and the woman who was nearly a member of this family, Angela Martins. The room erupted with shocked gasps and frantic questions. David held up his hand for silence. "There's more," he said. "Much more." That evening, David received an unexpected phone call. It was from a woman named Rita, Angela's younger sister. Her voice was shaking with fear and guilt. "Please, I need to see you," Rita whispered. "I have information about my sister. About what she really did." They met in a private, secure location the next day. Rita was a small, timid woman, nothing like her confident, cruel sister. She had lived in Angela's shadow for years, terrified of her. But watching the news, seeing the lies and cruelty continue, her conscience couldn't stay silent anymore. "Thank you for meeting me," Rita began, tears already forming in her eyes. "What I'm about to tell you is terrible. But you need to know the truth." She told them everything. She spoke of Angela's obsession with Michael Thompson that began many years ago. She spoke of how Angela had seen the Thompson family as obstacles to be removed. "She planned it all," Rita sobbed. "The kidnapping. It was her idea. She hired 2 men. She thought if Joshua disappeared, the family would fall apart. She thought she could swoop in later and comfort your father." David felt ice in his veins. "Are you saying she orchestrated my brother's kidnapping?" "Yes," Rita whispered. "But it gets worse." She explained how the kidnapping hadn't destroyed the marriage as Angela had hoped. It had only made Michael and Sarah cling to each other more tightly. So Angela had accelerated her evil plan. "She poisoned Mrs. Thompson," Rita said, her voice barely audible. "My sister murdered your stepmother to clear her path to your father." The revelation hung in the air like a bomb. The kidnapping. Sarah's death. Angela's perfectly timed arrival into Michael's life. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't fate. It was cold-blooded, calculated murder. Rita gave them another name. James Okafor, Angela's ex-boyfriend. He was the man who had arranged the kidnapping and helped obtain the poison. Faced with Rita's confession and the evidence David's team had already gathered, James confessed everything. He gave them names, dates, and the location of the corrupt doctor who had supplied the untraceable poison. The police came for Angela early one morning. She was arrested quietly at her apartment. When they read her the charges, kidnapping, conspiracy, and murder, she didn't even seem surprised. She had known this day might come. Her long game was over. The trial became the most sensational case Nigeria had seen in decades. Every news channel covered it. The courtroom was packed every single day. Angela's lawyers tried to paint her as a desperate woman driven by love. But the evidence was overwhelming. Rita testified, tears streaming down her face. James testified, his voice hollow with guilt. The doctor who supplied the poison testified. The financial records were presented. Every piece of the horrible puzzle was laid bare before the judge and jury. The judge, a stern older woman, listened to everything. When it was time for sentencing, she looked at Angela with no sympathy in her eyes. "You speak of wanting love," the judge said. "But your actions show you know nothing of love. You preyed on a family's grief. You stole a child's life. You murdered an innocent woman. This was not about love. This was about greed, ambition, and a complete lack of humanity." Angela was found guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. As the guards led her away, she looked back once at the courtroom. Her face showed no remorse. Only bitterness. Justice had been served. Back at the Thompson mansion, life slowly began to find a new rhythm. Joshua started therapy with a kind, patient doctor who specialized in trauma. It was hard work. There were nightmares. There were difficult days. But slowly Joshua began to heal. He resumed his education with private tutors. His mind, starved for knowledge for so long, soaked up everything like a sponge. He discovered he loved mathematics and history. He began to remember more happy memories from his childhood. His relationship with David grew deeper. David was more than a stepbrother. He was a mentor, a protector, and Joshua's closest friend. They would spend hours talking, playing chess, and simply being together. Michael dedicated himself completely to being the father he thought he'd lost the chance to be. Every morning he had breakfast with Joshua. Every evening they took walks in the garden. He listened to Joshua's stories about his years on the streets. He never interrupted. He just held his son close. The silence that had haunted the mansion for 10 years was finally, truly gone. It was replaced with laughter, conversation, and the simple, beautiful sound of a family learning to be whole again. One afternoon, Joshua and David sat together under the big mango tree in the garden. It was the same tree where Joshua used to play as a child. "I've been thinking," David said gently, "about all those children out there. Kids like you were lost. Forgotten. Suffering alone. Joshua looked at his brother. What are you thinking? I think we should help them, David said. I think we should create something. A foundation. A place where lost children can find hope. Joshua's eyes lit up. I love that idea. Together they created the Hope Seed Foundation. It was dedicated to helping lost, abused, and forgotten children across Nigeria. They built shelters. They provided education. They offered counseling and medical care. Most importantly, they gave children hope, something to hold on to in the darkness. The foundation became Joshua's purpose. It gave meaning to his suffering. Every child they helped was a small victory against the darkness that had once consumed his own life. Months passed. Then a year. The sharp edges of trauma began to soften. Joshua would always carry scars, both visible and invisible. But he was no longer defined by his suffering. He was defined by his strength, his courage, and his compassion. One quiet Sunday morning, Joshua sat in the garden with a journal. He was writing his story. David walked up and sat beside him on the grass. What are you writing? David asked. Joshua looked up. His face was peaceful. His eyes were clear and bright. A gentle smile touched his lips. I'm writing about a boy who got lost, Joshua said softly. A boy the world thought was gone forever. But he found his way home. And he learned that even in the darkest places, hope never completely dies. David put his arm around Joshua's shoulders. Together they sat in comfortable silence, watching the morning sun paint the garden gold. The past would always be part of them. The pain, the loss, the betrayal. But it no longer controlled them. The future stretched out before them, quiet and full of possibility. The boy who was lost had finally truly come home. And in that home, surrounded by love and purpose, he had found not just survival but life itself.